Hi, my name is Susan Ruediger, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of the CMT Research Foundation. I have CMT 1A, and I come from a long line of people who do. In fact, 6 generations in my family have CMT. I've watched my grandmother's body deteriorate. Now I'm watching my mom's body deteriorate, and sadly mine as well. Unfortunately, the next generation in my family has it, and it's not okay that we don't have treatments. It's not good enough for me. I started the Research Foundation with my co-founder, Pat Livney, who also has CMT, because we want to see an end to this disease. We are really inspired to bring together the academics who are best in CMT, the drug development companies who have the technologies to do clinical trials and develop treatments that can work for us, and the patient community who will be instrumental in informing what a treatment looks like, what treatments are meaningful to people. Together, the researchers, the pharmaceutical companies, and the patients are all required to drive research forward. We've seen this work in other diseases: spinal muscular atrophy, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. They're genetic neuromuscular diseases that now have treatments because the patient communities have brought the teams together to make it happen. But it hasn't happened for CMT yet. Did you know that CMT has the same global prevalence as multiple sclerosis? 3 million people around the world. And MS has over 17 treatment options available and 30 more drugs in development. As of July 1st, CMT has nothing. There's one drug that's in a phase 3 clinical trial and nothing approved. We know this as a patient community, but maybe what we don't know is why that is the case. I'm going to be working in a series of videos with a number of experts who are going to help unlock that mystery. Why do we not yet have treatments, and what can we do together to change it? I'm proud to be working with the CMT Research Foundation. I'm proud to be working with the team, the scientific advisors I have around me, and my awesome board members. We're coming together and building the patient community to really drive drug development forward. Why does CMT, a disease with the same prevalence and a similar impact on one's quality of life, why does it lag so far behind multiple sclerosis? Today, we're going to explore the answers to those questions by talking with experts from the CMT community, from some experts in drug development, and from the National Institutes of Health. This is just kicking off a series of videos that will help unlock the mystery. Why do we not have drugs yet for CMT? When can we expect them? And what is it going to take to make that happen? So I'm joined right now by Dr. Chris Austin. He is the director of the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, which is one of the centers at the National Institutes for Health. So thank you for being here, Chris.
Great to be with you.
Having him here is such an honor. You know, you are a geneticist and you are a neurologist, and you have a lot of experience with CMT, and
Yep.
work a lot in your current job with patient-led foundations and patient initiatives, and you know what it takes for drug development. And so I, as a patient, have a ton of questions to ask you as a drug developer on how can we move the needle forward. But first of all, I want to thank you because you've been such an excellent partner to me and to my co-founder, Pat Livney, and to the Research Foundation. You've just been an early supporter and advocate, and I'm really grateful for all of it. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
I'll continue my conversation with Dr. Austin in a moment, but first I want to sit down with Dr. Sindhu Ramchandren. Dr. Ramchandren is a medical director at PRA Health Sciences. She's also a clinical neurologist, and she led the CMT Center for Excellence at University of Michigan. She now works at PRA, helping them design clinical trials for neuromuscular diseases, including CMT. And she's really an expert in the drug development process and what it takes to be ready for clinical trials. So thank you for joining me, Dr. Ramchandren.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so you've taken a look at the world of CMT drug development. You're now working with companies on a pretty regular basis. Why is it taking so long for the CMT community to have drugs delivered? What's going on?
It's a great question, and it's a long and complicated answer, so let's get into it. So drug development takes a very long time, and it's a very iterative process with multiple steps being repeated to ensure patient safety and well-being. And there's very good reasons for this. In the past, in the 19th century, early 20th century, there weren't a lot of safeguards in place on how we do research. So there was a lot of experimentation being done. Risks were not adequately being shared with patients. A lot of false claims were being made about the effectiveness of a drug. And all of this came to a boiling point where the US FDA was developed in the US and similar regulatory boards were developed elsewhere, where they said, we gotta have some safeguards in place to protect patient well-being. You need to have a lot of different steps and you need to make it a slow process so that you don't rush and put out a drug that could harm somebody. So that's one of the reasons why this process became so long. And then CMT, of course, has its own challenges, being a very a heterogeneous disease. And what I mean by that is, if you look at diseases like MS or even ALS, what's different from in CMT is that CMT is not just one disease. It occurs because if you have a mutation in your gene that encodes nerves and the proteins in the nerves, any of those mutations can lead to CMT, to a different CMT type, but they're all kind of under this umbrella of CMT.
I think I heard just a couple of days ago, they suspect maybe even 2,000 different mutations that could cause CMT. I mean, we know of 100 different genes, and within those genes, lots of different mutations. But I heard that maybe even 2,000 mutations to cause CMT.
That very possibly could be true. Yeah, I think we are up to 300 and counting at last count, but it grows every day. So I'm sure we're going to hit that 2,000 number fairly soon. And that makes it challenging because you have a disease that's rare to begin with. You know, the rough estimates are 1 in 2,500 people worldwide have CMT. But then if you look down to the level of, well, how many of those people have this particular mutation, that's even a smaller number. So when you look at all the steps that are needed by the FDA to get a trial through, so you start off with drug discovery, where you do preclinical studies. And how do these drug discoveries happen? That happens because patients go to their physician. The physician realizes here are some new symptoms that we have to learn about and document and see how things are changing in time. And now we're going to see how whatever treatment we offer routinely, does that even help with this disease, or is this a new disease? So those are the first steps where you have the discovery process, and then you have an investigator come up with an idea and come up with some funds so that they can do preclinical studies. And the preclinical studies could be, you know, in a test tube on cell culture, where they're just saying, well, do I have something that can actually help this disease? And that takes funds, but not a whole lot of funds at that stage.
Okay, like about
but the next step,
how much that takes? Like, is that like 100 grand, like $500,000? Like, what is not that much in the world of
yeah,
drugs?
somewhere around. That's a very fair question. And what may not seem like a lot in the grand scope of research may seem like a very alarming amount to most people. So it takes about 100 grand to $500,000 sometimes for that preclinical stage, where you're testing out these therapies and trying to figure out, does this molecule seem to help this disease just at a cellular level? And that's that preclinical stage. And once you're past that preclinical stage, now you have to go to a pharmaceutical company to say, well, are you interested in developing this further? Do you want to take this to the clinical stage? Clinical trial stage now involves phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. The phase 1 trials are usually the first in human trials now. So you're past the preclinical and animal models. Now in the phase 1 trials, you're giving it to humans and saying, is it safe? Am I going to get any problems from that standpoint? Phase 2 trials, you look at the dosing. What dose seems to be the best? Is there a low dose that we can get away with? Or do we have to go for a higher dose and accept some trade-offs with side effects? And then comes phase 3, where you take that ideal dose and then you say, well, how effective is this drug at this ideal dose? Does it actually do what we want to do? Does it reduce the symptoms? Does it help actually even cure the disease? So there are all these different steps, and each one of them, when you're in the phase trials, will take many years to do. And many millions of dollars, to be very honest, for each one of those phases. So as you can imagine, from that drug discovery where the physician first sees the patient, realizes this is a new disease, gets interested to investigate it, comes up with a potential molecule, tests it out on a cellular level, takes it to the pharma company, tests it out on humans, it takes years. So usually we're looking at decades before a drug makes it all the way through, and many, many millions of dollars before that drug makes it through.
Can you tell us a little bit about what NCATs does and how you guys assist the drug development process so patients can understand the role you all play?
Yeah, sure. So NCATS has an official mission, of course, which is to develop new technologies to make the translational process more efficient. But really, what that means in our sort of unofficial byline is our mission is to figure out how to make this process of developing and deploying therapeutics work better, faster, cheaper, so that we will get more treatments to more people more quickly. And you know, it's interesting, and you and I have reflected on this. It's interesting that for all of the effort and money, enormous amount of resources in the public and private sector that go into developing therapeutics, the vast majority of it is spent on a paradigm which everyone universally acknowledges is inefficient, ineffective, costs too much, takes too long, and most of the time doesn't give us, or too many of the times, doesn't give us the answers that we want or the therapeutics that we want. And but that is NCAT's mission. And if I was to try to boil down what our sort of founding and operational hypothesis, it's that if we can understand the general principles, the scientific principles and the operational principles which underlie each step of this very long process that we may want to talk about. It's about a 20 step long process, takes 15, 20 years sometimes. That if we can understand every step of that process, we can convert what is currently a trial and error, so-called empirical process. It's more error than trial because we don't understand what the rules are. We can transform that from being a trial and error, failure-prone process to a predictive science.
So how does the patient foundation, like the research foundation, how do they change the pace? I mean, if it's so slow, what can we do to accelerate that pace as a patient group, as a foundation, or even just as patients who don't want to accept the fact that there's no treatment for us? How can we make a change to that?
One of my experiences as a clinician at the University of Michigan and even at Wayne State University, where I worked with Mike Shai before, was that we learn a lot from patients. And, you know, sometimes we have our own, as a physician, we have our own biases of what we think is important to the patient and what we think the disease should look like. And we were constantly educated by the patients. No, this is how it's progressing in me. This is how it's changing in me. I think when the patients take themselves out of that, there are reasons why. One could be that they feel intimidated and they feel, well, I'm not the expert. I will let the experts handle it. And I don't want to be, you know, putting my business in there when it doesn't belong. Right. But at other times, it's actually a way of empowering themselves where they feel like they've lost control and they feel like they're being dictated to as to this is your life and this is what's going to happen next. And the only way they can take back that control at that point seems to them to be, I'm just going to come out of that process completely. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to just reflect on what's going on with my life. And if I see something that comes available, then sure, great, I'll take a part in it. I think the disadvantage when you do that latter approach, or even when you're intimidated and don't participate is that then certain ideas just keep propagating itself in cycles and you don't get a real breakthrough. You get the best collaboration when patients are involved in the process. And there's strength in numbers. You know, one person can have a lot of passion, but unless you have a community behind you, you have that foundation behind you, you know, amplifying your voice and saying, this is what we care about, it doesn't go anywhere. So I think as an example of this would be, you know, the recently approved drug Zolgensma for SMA, where honestly, one of the founding reasons why this became so successful was Cure SMA, you know, the patient advocacy group that really got their patients together, founded a really strong community that had the same common purpose in mind. And then they went and approached pharmaceutical companies and key opinion leaders and experts in the community and got everybody together and talking to each other. And I think if you kind of withdraw yourself from that process, either because you're frustrated that you're being dictated to or because you feel intimidated by it, I think it really falls behind. And I think one of the hopes I have with these kind of podcasts is that we empower the patients, where we tell them, these are the facts, these are what we know, but share with us what you know and use your voice because it will help us. Whether your voice may be, you know, I will join the foundation and just hear and learn more about what's available, or I will donate funds so that you can fund some preclinical studies that are going on, which can then go on to those phase trials. Or it could be that I will go to a clinic that deals with CMT, and I'll be a part of their natural history studies. And those studies tell us, you know, what are the outcomes that are important to patients? What are the things that we should try to improve with the treatments that we're doing?
Well, I think it's a number of things. So certainly knowledge of the disease, knowledge and connections to the researchers, the best researchers in the field. Generally, patient foundations have found those people. They sometimes fund them. And so it makes it much easier for us to figure out who's good to work with. And the patient foundations tend to be fairly deliverable focused. That is, that they're interested in basic research, certainly, but what they really want is to have investigators who understand that at least one purpose of that is to serve as a foundation to develop a therapeutic. And so they're able to identify those researchers who are more suitable to working with us translational scientists who are pretty deliverable focused as well. The urgency also, I really have to emphasize, you know, scientists are wonderful people to hang around because they're endlessly curious. They find everything interesting. I sometimes say it's, as you know, we have two golden retrievers here at home who will have been barred from the recording studio, but one of the things that's wonderful about golden retrievers is they are endlessly curious. And if you've ever taken one of them on a walk, you know what I mean by that. They're constantly finding things to be interested in. Scientists are the same way. And that's a wonderful thing, except when you're trying to make a drug. In that case, you've got to keep them on the straight and narrow. Is this interesting or is this useful?
Right.
And there's a lot of things that are interesting but not useful. And they're both important. I don't want to minimize that. It's just that if you're trying to make a drug, you really need to keep your eye on the ball, and patients can do that. You know, scientists, for the most part, and particularly physician scientists, get into this field because they want to help people.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
But they don't know how to do that. And physicians, of course, are used to this because patients come to us for treatment. But scientists, you know, some PhD scientists are not so used to that, and so, you know, patients, I often find are apologetic. Do not be apologetic, for heaven's sake. You know, you are the secret sauce that scientists need to be productive and useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks for saying that. I mean, that's one thing that's exciting about my job is anytime I'm talking to a researcher, whether it's a clinician or whether it's at a drug development company or a basic researcher at an academic university, when I show them my hands, you know, and they see my CMT and they say,
"Oh yeah, yes, your Thanar eminence." Yes, that's
Thank you
Yeah.
for reminding me of why this work is important. Thank you for keeping me focused on what the outcome is. The outcome is that this functions better.
You know, I sometimes say that I view patient involvement as one of the prime disruptive technologies to make this process more efficient. And so, you know, I think this is the right thing to do from a humanistic point of view, certainly. But even if I didn't think so, if I didn't like people at all, which happily I do, but even if I didn't, I would still want to involve patients in the process because they're going to make my work better, easier. So why on earth, why wouldn't I want to do that? And we could also talk about that, why it's harder, easier said than done, as you know.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And, you know, as patients, we feel like we don't have time to waste and that we don't have money. And I also think that if we keep doing things the way we've always done them, we're going to keep getting the same results, which for me, is no treatment, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
A disruptor to the drug development process and partnering with NCATs, which is disrupting the process by bringing innovation. It's just, it's been really exciting. It's been an exciting development for the CMT and for the Research Foundation. Well, isn't that a reason to partner with biotechs and with farmers whose end game is not tenure, whose end game is commercialization?
Right. And it's a great question. And you know, when I came here from pharma, you know, it was very clear that there were wonderful things that biotech and pharma do, not the least of which, in my view, is having their eye on the ball. What benefits patients and what doesn't? And we're going to only do things which benefit patients. But what sometimes gets lost in that, of course, is time, and sometimes this just takes longer than the 2 to 3 to 4 years. Sometimes, especially for a small organization, has to spend in order to give a return to their shareholders, and sometimes it's a perception of a need to use the same old way of doing things because that is viewed as less risky. And if you have to get a return in 3 to 4 to 5 years, that's really hard.
Right.
So if you go to a company and you say, well, you know, you got to have something which meets your financial investors' needs, and is a think different approach. Those two things often go in opposite directions, and that's the reason that organizations like yours and mine are so important. Because what you do is you de-risk. You make it possible for companies to do things that by themselves they could not do. Not because they don't think it's important, not that they don't have their heart in the right place. It's that they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders that they can't meet without some sort of non-dilutive capital to help them do what they would really like to do in diseases like CMT.
Yeah. And it's been fun for us. I mean, we have partnerships with 3 new pharma companies, biotech, who weren't in CMT before.
Yeah.
And in CMT because we've brought expertise and money and initiative and patience to them to say, you know, we hope that we can motivate you to get involved in CMT, and they have. So and you know, that's 2 years into the foundation.
So can I ask you, I have an answer to this question, of course, but I'll ask you, turn the tables here. Why do you think that is? Why do you think companies have found CMT an attractive disease to work on?
So my answers, and I'd love to hear yours as well, but my answers are, 1, because of the prevalence. You know, there are 3 million people who have CMT. and we don't have any treatments. So we've got
Yep.
a high unmet need.
Yep.
Where our prevalence is low enough that we qualify for the orphan drug designation, so
Yep.
lower barriers of approval,
Yep.
smaller clinical trials, different outcome measures.
Yep.
So, you know, that makes it a little bit easier and a lot more attractive because it's a high unmet need.
I think all those things are absolutely correct. And the only thing I would add to this from what the company people are thinking is that this is a chronic disease.
Chronic, yeah, for sure.
So if you are the maker of a product, you want your customers to be repeat customers. You want them to have a need, that. Why is it that when COVID started, people went after toilet paper? It's because they knew toilet paper was going to be an ongoing need.
Yeah. That's one thing that I think is my responsibility as a patient, is to go to the Center of Excellence. And I don't have one in Atlanta where I live, so I have to travel, and it's an overnight trip for me, and it's expensive and it's timely. And quite frankly, Sindhu, and this as a clinician, I leave that visit because I've been going regularly. The first visit I went to, it was remarkable because for the first time I'm seeing a CMT expert who can say, this is where your body is, this is the determination, this is what you can expect, this is your family history. And that was amazing and wonderful. Here's a physical therapist, here's a leg brace specialist, here are some things that might help you in your daily life. And that was wonderful. Since then, it's updates. Okay, so here's where you've progressed. Here's what's going on. And of course, I know that because I'm watching the knives slip out of my hand or the pens slip out of my hand, or unable to do my necklace as well as I could have a couple years ago. And it can be a little, sometimes I wonder, is it really worth my time and energy? But then when I think about my responsibility as a patient to the community, to say, I am giving the history of the disease every time I go. And I'm giving the clinicians more information and hopefully the pharmaceutical companies more information so we can design a better clinical trial. And for me, I just think that that's a responsibility. We also have a lot of fun. My uncle and I make that trip every year. We have a lot of fun. It's a thing we do. I would love to see more patients get involved with the centers of excellence that are done through the Inherited Neuropathies Consortium, all these CMT expert centers, and build up the number of patients who are there. I think that's critical so we can have better, more selection for clinical trial. That seems really important.
I completely agree.
Yeah, that seems really important to me. So,
and I think your experience was very similar to what a lot of patients would share with me as well, which is that first visit is mind-blowing because you finally deal with physicians and other health practitioners who know exactly what you have, who know exactly why you are having these symptoms and have suggestions and things to offer. And subsequent visits can feel like a letdown where, okay, now you already know what I have and things are changing and you don't have a treatment yet for me. Right. But it is exactly what you said, which is from that point on, we are learning from you. We are learning what has changed, what is the rate of change of every single thing we measure at every visit, so that when we have a drug, we know what should be expected. This is how quickly things normally change. And CMT is a slow disease. Things don't change quickly. Right. But if you have something that's slowly changing and the drug stops it and just keeps that pace of change static, that's a huge difference. And that's what we learn when you come to those annual pilgrimages. So it's very helpful and it's very useful to us.
And do you know what that would mean for somebody like me, the stopping the progression of the disease? I mean, ultimately, I would love to have a reversal of the disease. I'm 48, I'll be 49 next month. If we can just stop this in its tracks, then I don't have to worry about maybe this is my last summer to go for a hike, or maybe this is my last time, my last opportunity to get out and do the thing that feels a little too risky right now. We could stop the progression. I could say, I can do this from here on out the rest of my life. I mean, of course, the normal aging process, but that's really exciting and inspiring to me. You know, my mom is 75 and she's almost full-time well, she's 100% in her walker, not very comfortable walking around. And when I think about, that's, you know, 20 years for me, 25 years for me. And that, man, we've got to get fast on this, Sindhu. I don't want a walker. You know, I've got my leg braces and this is just about as much as I want. I really want to get on this, and I'm excited by all the work that's being done. I take a look at the pipeline today. It's late June of 2020, and I see the pipeline has something like 21 drugs in it and 21 pharmaceutical efforts. And when you did the ascorbic acid trial 10 years ago, there weren't any, correct?
That's absolutely right.
So what has changed? I mean, the Human Genome Project and the whole idea of opening up gene therapy has changed. What else has changed at CMT? Why are we where we are today? Why are so many companies interested?
I think what changed, at least in the more recent years, and again, this is based on my new perspective in this role, is that you're starting to see approvals. So I would say that initially pharmaceutical companies were very reluctant to be a part of rare neurological diseases because the impression was it's rare, there's not very many people affected with it, it is not good business. And I think we really made a big difference by getting these foundations, these patient advocacy groups together, where we took that patient voice, amplified it, and sent it to the companies and showed you have a huge community that's going to support you. You are going to have a market. And understandably, this is not the only thing that drives them. I've met many pharmaceutical company members now, and I can say that they genuinely care about the disease as well. It's not just the bottom line, but it helps to know that, you know, this is something that's feasible financially as well, that you can recruit easily in a rare disease like CMT. You can recruit 300 patients like Pharnex did in their first phase 3 trial. And I think that kind of background, and then the approvals that started coming on, Eteplirsen with Duchenne, and then Sarepta when they got their approval, and then following that when we had Biogen coming up with their drug for SMA, and then we had Zolgensma with Avexis that then went to Novartis. So we just had all these approvals coming one after the other, and I think that caught a lot of interest, and people started saying, okay, this is feasible. We just need to know who to go to. And they started realizing, I think, that patient foundations and advocacy groups are really a good place to start, where they can reach out to somebody and very quickly have a sense of what is the current status of the community, how organized are they, how involved are they, and how supportive will they be if we have a treatment. And I think that really drives up that pace. And I think that really changed in the recent years.
So being involved with the patient foundations is really important for a patient, because then a foundation like the Research Foundation can go to a large pharmaceutical company and say, look, we've got 30,000, 50,000, whatever that number is, patients with whom we're interacting, and we can galvanize the community. If you've got something ready for us, we can get behind it, and we can galvanize our community.
Absolutely. And I think, as you know, every foundation has different aims and different goals. Some are focused on patient outcomes, you know, to make sure that their quality of life is forefront when you're doing a clinical trial. Others are focused on preclinical work, like the CMTRF, where you seek to highlight and fund projects that will make that next discovery, where you can prove that you have a signal that can be led into that preclinical stage, and then that can perhaps go into the phase trials, you know, the 1, 2, and 3 that we're talking about. So your participation in these groups may be driven by your interest in what you find most exciting, but participate. I think that's the first step, you know. Don't be intimidated, and don't be disappointed by what you have perceived or what feedback you've received so far from clinicians or from other members when you reached out to them initially. Don't let that define how you will participate in future. You know, keep trying, find the group that best fits your needs and be a part of it and push that frontier forward.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, it's when I had my first appointment with a neurologist and in Atlanta, and he said, "Yeah, you have CMT. What do you want me to do about it?" I just felt like there had to be something more. I felt like there had to be, and I was a new mom. I had a 6-week-old baby at the time, and I didn't know whether she had CMT or not. And I just thought that is the wrong answer to tell a new mother who has a 50% chance of passing this genetic disease on to her daughter. So, there are some people who are really empowered and who say, I've got to change this. And there are other people who say, what can I do? And I'm just a patient. For me, I don't have a science background. Why would my voice matter? And I think you've just really helped solidify why every patient's voice matters. It helps in the clinicians understand the outcomes that are important for patients. It helps the pharmaceutical companies understand the outcomes that are important for patients. It helps the pharmaceutical companies understand the need. I mean, we have 3 million people in the world who have CMT, and none of them have a treatment right now. And if that's not a business case, I'm not sure what is. We're a rare disease, and so the barriers are lowered for treatments for CMT than they are for some of the more common diseases in the approval process. And patients can help advocate, patients can help fund, patients can help participate. That I think what you're saying is that the voice of the patient is so critical in this process. And without it, pharma wouldn't really be all that interested. Is that a fair statement?
I think that is a very accurate statement. I think what drives it is not one researcher in a lab somewhere saying, I found a molecule. It's the patient. That's where everything comes down to. So in whatever way you feel most comfortable participating in this process, do so. And as you said, it could be as simple as going once a year to your neurologist and getting those assessments done. That pushes the needle forward. Or it could be getting into a clinical trial or providing funds to support research, whatever that step might be for you, but get involved.
What excites you the most that you see coming down the pike for CMT?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate your foundation for putting that therapeutic link up on your website. And I don't mind saying, consistent with what we've been saying about the importance of patients group, when you first told me that you were going to ask me that question, I asked you, does your foundation have a good place I can catch up on what's going on in CMT? And in fact, you do. You are a better place for me to learn about CMT than all the resources that I have at the National Institutes of Health. So if you ever doubted that this was important, may this dispel that notion.
Thank you.
I think the most exciting thing for me is actually the diversity of approaches on that Gantt chart or that list of programs. It may not be evident to folks who look at that immediately, but you notice that if you look at that for the folks who are listening to this, that there are 3 big categories. One is small molecules. It's kind of a silly term, but it's the term that we use for drug-like chemicals that are of a certain class. And then there's a whole bunch of those, and then there's a whole bunch of gene therapies. But the important thing is, and then there's one cell therapy too. And the important thing about that is that this is a multifactorial disease. That is to say, it has multiple genetic causes, but even within a genetic cause, there are multiple steps at which have to happen before that original genetic defect is manifested in a foot drop or some other other phenotype it is. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about that pipeline is that it has interventions at many, not all, but many of those steps. And if we look at the history of therapeutic development and treatment, and some of you who are listening to this probably have high blood pressure. And if you have high blood pressure, you're probably on more than one drug. I have high blood pressure. I don't mind telling you, I'm on 3.
Okay.
One drug is not good enough. I need 3 different mechanisms. I take them all, and only with all of them combined is my blood pressure controlled. So my point is that one of these is very, very, very unlikely to actually do the entire job.
Right.
The other is it spreads risk. So each of these has upsides and downsides. Sometimes some of them are single treatments. Some of them you got to take every day for the rest of your life. Some of them are very focused. Some of them are more general approaches. I must say, like any good geneticist, the ones that do excite me the most are the ones that you categorize as gene therapy. And those with a sharp eye will notice that some of those are what absurdly we can call conventional gene therapy. Conventional meaning it's been around for 20 years. That's now traditional. But then there's also these things called antisense oligonucleotides or ASOs, and then there are also these gene editing approaches. And what your listeners need to understand about that is that each one of these, as we go from small molecules to gene therapy to ASOs to gene editing, we're becoming less and less and less conventional. So the Food and Drug Administration has less and less experience as we go down that list.
When do you think, as patients, we can look for treatments for CMT?
I wish I could give you a specific date. But what I would say is I am very confident that this decade, we will have at least one treatment approved, if not more, in CMT. I'm very confident of that.
That is so awesome. You're the first person who ever put that in those terms to me.
I'm putting that, yes, on video.
Wow, that I don't know if you can tell. I haven't heard that before, and that is so awesome. That inspires me to want to work even harder to work with the patient community and the scientific community and the pharma community and bring them all together. We can make it happen this decade, then we need to be doing it, and we need to be relentless about it.
Absolutely. I think every time in almost every field we have seen the first treatment that's put out there may not be the best, but it makes a difference. And that's why it was approved by the FDA. But that just drives that pace faster and faster. So that is why I feel very confident that at least one, if not more, will come through this decade.
That's just awesome. If they're young or if they're looking at their children, I hope that they see that this with their activism is solvable. It's solvable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sindhu.
And thank you. I really truly mean this. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for doing this. You are meeting such an unmet need right now by what you do. So thank you for doing this. I'm just really happy and proud to be a part of your group as your scientific advisory member.
Thanks. Thank you. So I hope you guys are really excited and inspired by what we've heard today. Yes, pharma is interested in CMT. Yes, patients have the ability to drive it forward. And yes, there are people out there working for CMT every single day. There's a lot more that we have to explore on this topic, and there will be videos coming soon to explore the different aspects of drug development for CMT. And we will eventually talk to the companies who are working in it. I hope you'll continue to join me for this video series. I look forward to seeing you here on a regular basis. And of course, if you have any questions, please email me. I'm happy to take any of your emails. You're welcome to call me as well. I'd love to hear the questions that you have. What can we get answered for you in this series? Stay well, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.